This session is recorded. Please be mindful of what you choose to share. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking, and please keep your camera on. We love to see your friendly faces, and it really helps us to build a community. Please be mindful of others, and we also would like to ask you to update your Zoom to show both your first name, last name, and your agency. And you can do that by clicking on the 3 dots by your name. And we'd like to go ahead and get started with introductions. My name is Laura Chavez, and I'm a project manager here at the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our hub team. Mark?
Great. Thank you, Laura. My name is Mark Fidel. I own Fidel Consulting Group, where my clients are technology companies. And I'm a subject matter expert with the Chamber's Project ECHO, and I'll be your presenter today.
Great. Thank you. Greg?
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Mullen. I'm the CEO here at ABQ IT. We are a locally owned and operated IT managed services company, and proud to be on the hub team here as a subject matter expert.
Great. Roxy?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roxy Marquez, and I'm a program manager with Project ECHO. Thank you, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Roxy. Elliot?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elliot Padras. I'm a program specialist with Project ECHO.
Great. Thank you, Elliot. So for everyone else, for all the participants, we'd like to ask you to please, if you can introduce yourself in the chat box. Once again, your first name, last name, and agency. We'd love to know who's here. And with that, once again, I'm going to introduce our presenter, Mike Fidel of Fidel Consulting. And the topic is when to consider using a managed service provider and managed security service.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time who's joined today. My background is such that I have worked with managed service providers and managed security service providers as partners to their organizations. And a managed service provider, we'll get into some definitions here in a bit, but really this is focused for small businesses, right? And so the idea is that, gosh, when should I consider doing this and engaging with a vendor who can help me with my technology as a business owner? Now, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, really doesn't matter. The considerations are really the same, all right? Our agenda today is, what do small businesses face today from a technology perspective? I'll help you understand what the differences are. First of all, what are MSPs and what are MSSPs? And then what are the differences? And then getting into things about your organization when you should make those considerations and start thinking about this and start doing your research. Finally, what are the costs, right? These things will cost something. What are they going to cost? What might they save? Okay. Finally, moving into then how to choose the right partner with questions to ask those potential vendors, right? And then certainly things to avoid. If you see a vendor either providing certain offerings but not following through or not offering them at all, right? Those things to avoid. And then we'll certainly open up for questions. And then at like other Project ECHOs where we've talked about case studies, I'll talk about what not to do, right? How not to engage a managed service provider, right? And why what I'm going to describe can be problematic. All right. So moving on. So today, 43% of cyber attacks target small and medium-sized businesses, which makes sense given the volume of the businesses in our country are classified as small businesses, right? The large preponderance of organizations are small businesses. Most of them utilize some level of technology to run their business, regardless of what they're doing. Whether it's as simple as taking in payments and managing the accounting systems, right? Or whether it's an integrated technology system that helps them in their manufacturing environment. There's technology all around us. 60% of attacked small and medium-sized businesses close within 6 months because of the severity of the attack and the financial implications of that. Okay. In a previous ECHO session, I talked about the importance of cyber insurance. This is another element of protecting your business from a cybersecurity perspective. Okay. The average cost of a data breach for SMBs, regardless of whether insurance is involved, is $200,000. Now, if there's no insurance involved, how many small businesses can afford a $200,000 hit, right? Another thing to consider is that there are currently about 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally, probably around 750,000 here in the States alone. Okay. So SMBs are prime targets simply because of the volume of SMBs, right? It's a target-rich environment. Most lack in-house resources to defend themselves adequately, right? The IT person is also the marketing director and just happens to be more skilled and more well-versed in IT than everybody else, right? And so is that fair to that individual when their primary job is marketing to then be answering IT questions? Maybe not. And these slides will be shared with you, will be available to the audience here after the session. So what are the differences? Well, a managed service provider on the left can help you manage your IT infrastructure. So the cabling, the equipment, the desktop computers, laptop computers, mobile devices, right? They can offer help desk and end user support. So submitting tickets, right, for that. The Hispano chamber utilizes one of its members for that purpose, Abbott Technologies, right? And submitting tickets and then getting help with those things. That's the goal of the MSP, is to manage those day-to-day questions. Network monitoring and maintenance, right? What's going on with the network? Do we need, is a certain piece of equipment going to fail? Has it failed? How do we resolve that? Cloud services and backups, helping your business, your organization interact with any of the cloud services. So if you use Salesforce, if you use any sort of SaaS, software as a service offering, right, your managed service provider can help with that as well. Okay. Backups are critical. And it's not critical for the sake of doing backups. It's the reason we do backups of our systems is in the event we have to restore information, right? It's useless to say our backups are done every night, but you don't know if you can restore, right? And so from that perspective, your managed service provider can be responsible for doing the backups and making certain that the restoration of that data is possible, right? Hardware and software lifecycle. Once we buy the computers, they start aging, right? Once they're in use, they start aging. Sometimes the computers are too old for the software we want to use. And so the MSP can help manage that, that element of the technology environment for you, right? I'd rather that they manage it than me having to worry about it while I'm trying to do my own job, right? And then patch management, software updates, right? It's critical that software updates get done in a timely basis because most software updates relate to security issues, vulnerabilities in that software that need to be patched. And I'm looking at you, Microsoft. At any rate, on the right side, an MSSP is everything that an MSP does, plus they can provide what are 24/7 security operations center. If your business is such that you are running on a 24/7 cycle, right, 3 8-hour shifts, 2 8-hour shifts, think healthcare maybe, think a manufacturing operation possibly, right? It might be necessary to have now your MSSP manage that for you. Threat detection and incident response, right, is something that can be layered on. Log management, all of the things that help manage security and most of the devices that we use create logs or record of what's going on. So every time you log into your network, right, there's a record of it. Let's say that there are 2 logins for one person from 2 different machines in 2 different geographies. That's a problem, right? It should be 1 login, 1 person, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's happening, well, somebody has a username and password that they shouldn't have. And so log management and the logs that are generated are voluminous, and it's more useful to have somebody else manage that. Vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. Now, you don't want the same company who's doing the managing of your network to test their own work, because of course it's going to be pristine, right? But they can bring to bear resources that can independently test the network for vulnerabilities and for weaknesses. Compliance management. If you're in an environment that is regulated, think healthcare, think financial services, right? There are elements of those regulations that have a bearing on your computer environment. Your MSSP can help manage the compliance elements that are technology related. Okay. And finally, dark web monitoring and threat intel. That can be, is our entity being talked about by bad guys, essentially? Are we a pointed target, or are we just a drive-by target and we were the unfortunate recipient of, one of 20 million emails that had ransomware in it, right? Or is somebody specifically targeting? Depending on how you engage the MSSP can determine the level of services that they're providing, pure and simple. So 5 signals, it's time to act. You can't find or afford IT security talent. Cybersecurity talent shortage is real. If you've been looking for a chief information security officer or even a security analyst and you're having a hard time finding it, don't worry, you're not alone. And that's where you either build or buy. You either hire or bring in as a vendor, right? You've had a security incident or a near miss, a ransomware attempt or a successful attempt, a phishing breach, right? An email that purportedly came from the CEO. I don't know if Ernie's on. Is he on today?
Not right
All
now.
right. So we'll use him as the example, right? Let's say you received an email from Ernie saying, hey, we need to recognize our volunteers. Can you go out and buy, 25 Walmart gift cards for $200 each? Well, that's weird, but it looks like it's coming from Ernie, right? And that can cause a loss of money if in fact it wasn't Ernie, right? Data leaks, right? A laptop walking away. Somebody has data on a thumb drive and now the thumb drive's missing, right? That type of information. Somebody inadvertently emailed something they shouldn't have to somebody who shouldn't have it. Compliance requirements, again, HIPAA, PCI DSS. So PCI is the payment card industry. And if your entity accepts payment cards, credit and debit cards for payments, right, then you have a PCI compliance requirement. Now, depending on the number of transactions that you do a year, in a year's time, will determine your level of compliance. And it may simply be that your bank approaches you and says, hey, we need to have your system tested to make sure that it is in compliance with payment card industry requirements. Now, payment card industry is not a governmental entity. It is Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, the cards, right, that have gotten together and essentially for many years prevented government oversight into their business because they are doing the protection themselves. For a number of years, the state of New Mexico was, it is one merchant ID, the state of New Mexico. And so merchant ID is what that bank gives you to transact business with it, right? But there are 28, 30 agencies that accept payment cards, but it's one merchant ID. So if any one of those agencies are out of compliance, then the entire state is out of compliance. And that's the problem that the state faced a number of years ago. And my company, we helped them get back into compliance. And it took some time. The state was being fined $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month for this being out of compliance. But if the state had not taken measures to rectify that problem, PCI could have told Wells Fargo, we're not accepting payments from the state of New Mexico anymore, right? And so the state was spending roughly $450,000 a year to us to help them get back into compliance. And a conversation I had with one of the state's controllers was, because he said, that's expensive. I said, yes, but don't think of it as spending $450,000. Think of it as being able to continue to accept tens of millions of dollars of payment card transactions every year by spending $450,000, right? So if you're out of compliance with something in your environment, that can be detrimental to you running your business. It's a distraction, not a strategic function. Again, if your team spends more time firefighting in your computing environment rather than doing the work of your business, that's a hint that maybe we need some outside assistance. Okay. And then finally, you're growing and you're growing fast, right? Not being able to keep up. We have 25 new employees this month, and then we're expecting another 30 next month or whatever you're doing. And some of them are remote, some of them are on site. How do we manage this? That might be where you can turn to a third-party vendor to help you with that. And Greg, I know you're in this business as well. And Greg, and we have some folks from ABBA on the call. If anything of what I am saying is out of bounds, please come off mic and let me know, right? Because I want to hear it from the experts.
Yeah, it all sounds great so far.
All right, good to know. All right. And Greg's not in the room with me right now. I'm not passing him 20s to say that. So that's good. All right. So cost versus risk. Let's make the business case, right? The true cost of a breach, incident response is after the incident, and we know the incidents happened. How do we recover? This is regardless of whether there's insurance, right? This is money that will be spent somehow, some way. So incident response can be anywhere from 15 to 50,000, and I know of instances of 250,000 for relatively small organizations. Downtime is roughly 21 days on average, $8,000 a day. If you are in a regulated environment, that could result in fines. Think healthcare, right? Regulatory fines, it's a crapshoot, but let's say 10,000 to $1 million plus. Legal and notification costs, if in fact you have to notify individuals whose data you happen to be maintaining and that data was breached, and you have to now notify them of that, those costs can start at $25,000 and upwards of $100,000. Reputation and customer loss is immeasurable, right? I don't want to do business with this entity because they don't keep my information safe. And that entity is a doctor's office, right? That type of thing. Cyber insurance premium hike, 30 to 50%. Critical to this conversation is the information I shared in the cyber insurance presentation a couple months ago, right? These things don't stand in isolation. These are all puzzle pieces to a larger puzzle. Okay. What the MSP or MSSP delivers is a predictable monthly cost, right? You negotiate what you need, what they can offer, anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 a month, again, depending on what the requirements are. You could have 24/7 monitoring coverage versus 8 to 5 in-house. You can have a team of specialists versus one generalist in-house. Proactive patching and alerts, which is huge in terms of reducing risk by 60 to 70%, right? You don't want to come across a Windows 98 machine when we're on Windows 11, right? That type of thing, because those aren't being patched anymore. Compliance support is included. You want to avoid fines if you're in a regulated environment. And scalable, it grows with you. If you're busy hiring folks for your core competencies, right, you want your IT infrastructure to keep up with you, okay, on that level. How to choose the right partner? Questions to ask any provider. What is your average response time for critical incidents? An additional is, how do you know what a critical incident is? How do you define critical incidents, right? Do you have experience with my industry and my compliance needs, right? Is monitoring truly 24/7, which you might require, or is it business hours only? Okay. The reverse of that is, can we just get coverage business hours only because we're not open 24/7, right? That type of thing. Okay. What does your incident response process look like? How does that work? And that's an important question, because it's not a matter of if an incident happens, it's when an incident happens, what does the response look like, right? What can we expect? To that end, your managed service provider can also help you create an incident response plan for IT, right? It can also help you create a disaster recovery plan for IT, okay? Make sure you see a sample SLA. And the SLA is the, Greg, help me with the words that
Service
create SLA.
level agreement.
Thank you. Right. The SLA is the defining document which says if this happens, then this is the response. It's essentially an if then. And if this happens, then expect a 2-hour response with, right? And if they violate that, then what are the ramifications? What if they respond in 4 hours versus 2 hours? Okay, were we damaged by that? Was my business damaged because of that delayed response? If so, there should be remedy in the contract. Okay, and all of this should be discussed in advance, not to be discussed 4 hours into a 2-hour response time, right? How do you handle escalations, major breaches? What does their coverage look like, right? What tools and platforms do you use? Why have you chosen those, right, when you're working with them? Red flags to avoid if they don't have an SLA or if it's vague. No dedicated account manager for your business. One size fits all pricing. Resistance to references, meaning, hey, I'd like to talk to some of your customers, right? Now, to be fair, if you are in the defense industrial complex and you're asking for references of a managed service provider or managed service, they may not be able to provide their customers, right? Simply because of the environment in which they operate, right? But typically they should be able to provide references. If they themselves don't have a documented incident response plan, that's a problem, right? If you're locked in with no exit terms, that's a problem, right? That's a problem for any contract, by the way, not just with managed service providers. And they can't explain why they're using the software and hardware tools that they're using. If they can't explain that, because they're only acquiring and using those tools on behalf of their customers. So they should be able to explain. Okay. Stay in-house. Best if you have a dedicated IT team and that team, 5 or more staff. Okay. Low compliance requirements. We don't have a lot of government oversight into our business. Okay. Simple, stable infrastructure, significant IT budget. Now, if you look at the combination of those things, there's not many companies that fit those 4 criteria, right? There are some, but certainly not a lot. Okay. If your decision framework is your IT team is overwhelmed, or the people acting as de facto IT team members are overwhelmed, right? That's one way. Rapid growth is underway. Let's say you got a new grant or a new contract and you're expanding, right? What does that look like? You want predictable IT costs. You don't want 1 month to be 20,000, the next month 5, the third month 35,000, right? Budgeting is important. And you may need 24/7 infrastructure uptime. You may not want to run your own server, right? You may want somebody else to manage the servers in their environment for you. Okay. So MSP, maybe pair that with cybersecurity awareness training for the employees. And then finally adding an MSSP, which is everything in the middle. And if you are faced with a breach or a near miss, consider some outside assistance, right? Handle regulated data, payment card industry, HIPAA, financial services, right? Businesses have no security expertise internally, or you operate in a high risk industry. And so these are really some elements of a decision framework. Happy to work with you offline to examine your environment and to get an objective view of what an MSP or MSSP can provide you. Your next steps, you can do this or maybe not. Map your assets, identify gaps in coverage, and understand your current exposure. So risk assessment does exactly that. Where are we now from a security and IT operations perspective? Where should we be given metrics that are available? And what does it take to fill that gap, right? Many managed service providers and MSSP offer a free initial assessment, right? That's a way to give you some credible information without confining yourself to a contract or paying for it, okay? Define your requirements. Understand what your compliance obligations are, your budget range, growth plans, critical systems, and understand these before talking to any vendors. request 3 proposals. This isn't good just if you're in government, right? It's always good to get competing quotes, okay? And depending on the situation, your MSP or MSSP might be local or they might be national. It just depends on what that situation is. Luckily, here in Albuquerque, we have some really good local resources, and there's also national players, right? If your workforce is such that it would really help to have that local presence, maybe not on site, but local, then consider local, certainly, right? If your workforce is headquartered here, but you have people all over the country, maybe then it won't matter. I would contend that whether it's Albuquerque based or national, Albuquerque based might be easier because of where your headquarters is, right? Start small. You don't have to, spend a bunch of money up front. You will have to spend money. Let's be honest about that. But you won't have to spend a bunch of money out front and then expand deliberately. So you can pilot a few endpoint servers, maybe a security operations center service first, measure those outcomes. Are we getting what we wanted? And then maybe decide on a full engagement. Trust me, if an MSP or MSSP wants to work with you, they'll work with you in a guided fashion. And if they won't, move on, right? Look to somebody else. Question.
Yeah, Mark, we have a question in the chat box
Great.
from Maria.
Okay.
She wants to know what industries are considered high risk.
Great. Maria, the attorney answer is it depends, right? But where you're holding regulated data, so if you're holding HIPAA quality data, so you are either a creator of HIPAA data or you're a business associate, and if you know what that term means, then you understand HIPAA, right? You're sharing medical information or you're using medical information because of the work you're in. Doctor's office, clinic, pharmacy, hospital, right? If you're holding financial information because of you're a bank, you're a credit union, you're a lending company, you're a mortgage lender, right? That type of information. If you're holding personally identifiable information for others, right? So think about that, right? We're all holding personally identifiable information for our customers on one level or another, right? Mm-hmm. High risk would mean to me that you are in the military industrial complex, right? You are in the supply chain to the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy, right? And there are definitely compliance standards you have to qualify for, right? That you have to maintain. Now, there's a number of small businesses that are vendors to either primes like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or vendors to vendors of those, right? That are in the supply chain, right? There's something called CMMC, which is a compliance standard, which is currently isolated to DoD supply chain, Department of Defense supply chain. But the great likelihood is that CMMC is going to expand first next to Department of Energy and then to other federal entities in order to, if you want to work with the federal government, then your in computing environment has to be compliant with the CMMC standards. Maria, did that answer your question in a roundabout way? All right. If it didn't, ask it again. You're welcome to come off mute. Any other questions I can field at this time?
Yes, it did answer my question. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, that's one. I'll take it. That's great. All right. So now we are at the questions. Are there other questions? Let's understand that just because of the preponderance and the volume of small and medium-sized businesses, they're a target, right? Simply put, right? MSP, typically think of that as IT operations. MSSP is IT operations plus security, okay? Prevention costs far less than recovery, right? The right partner should feel like an extension of your team. Assuming you have cyber insurance, talk to your insurer about who they use for incident response vendors, right? When dealing, if one of their clients has an incident, what vendors do they turn to, right? So that could be helpful. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Folks from ABBA or Greg, since you're both in the business, anything that you'd like to put out here?
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Mark. Really appreciate you doing this. One thing I would just ask people to sort of put themselves, if you're a business owner or have a stake in an organization, put yourself right now in the shoes of coming in, and seeing an incident in real time on your computer. Um, do you know what your company's incident response plan is? What you're supposed to do if you think your computer has been compromised? Do you have a plan as a business? And hopefully it's not just like go to Google and Google for help, something like that. So everybody should have that incident response plan. Really put yourself in a mindset of what are you going to do? What's your first step? It should be turned to that written incident response plan. If you don't have one, I think that's a great indicator that you're a little bit behind the eight ball and probably should take some of Mark's advice here and partner up with someone.
Okay, Laura?
Yeah, we have another question in the
Great.
chat box from Ruben.
Okay.
Ruben is asking, what are some ways to remind employees about workplace awareness about cybersecurity?
Okay,
or
great,
cyber
Ruben.
safety?
Great, Ruben. Good to see you. Glad you were able to join today. You could do this on an ad hoc basis, or you could have dedicated training that happens. There are entities that'll manage your information security awareness training and bring in and come in and do those presentations for you. It's a great idea. If you need resources, contact me, right? If you have cyber insurance, contact your agent and ask them for resources because they should be very, very interested in helping you answer that question, quite honestly. All right. So there's resources out there, Ruben, and you don't want to be reminded after the fact. You don't want to be reminded after you went out, after you're the employee that went out and bought those 35 Walmart gift cards because the CEO sent you an email, right? You want to be that employee who stopped, called the CEO and said, hey, did you just send me an email about Walmart gift cards? And preface it with, I don't think you should have. I don't think you did, but did you? Because I just got an email saying, go out and buy 35 Walmart gift cards for our volunteers, right? And so a lot of things come in about common sense as well. If an employee in your accounting area sees an invoice for a vendor that you haven't worked with in a while, right? Check the email address. Is it legitimate? Call that vendor. Did you just send me an invoice? Right? If your business is small enough that you should know, gosh, we didn't just buy services from them, right? Double check it, right?
Mark, we just had one of those this week. I'm not even kidding you. Someone just sent a random invoice to our
that you did.
accounts payable, and yep, luckily she checked with me before thinking,
No,
hey.
absolutely.
Yep.
Los Lunas earlier this year, it was Valencia County, I think, not Los Lunas, but Valencia County, their CFO resigned because she approved payment for $2 million to somebody who was purporting to be in the construction management company of the hospital they're building in Valencia County. And they played her for a number of months to get to the point of a $2 million check. And that's really unfortunate because there were, hindsight's perfect. We get that, right? But the email address was wrong enough that it was visible and it was wrong. And she was not communicating with the construction company at all. She was communicating with the person who ultimately got the $2 million. So that's no fun. Ruben, did that help at all?
Yeah, I would say my daughter worked as a manager at one of the Apple stores, and she said every single day, someone's coming in to try to buy those gift cards, and they would warn them, they would tell them, they would do everything they can to talk to them about it until they got out the door. They realized and came back, and then she's like, "It's too late. We've made every effort. Banks are doing the same thing."
Yeah.
So the commercial side people are trying to help us. We just are not helping
I
ourselves.
agree, and And I've seen banks try to intervene when folks will come in and say, I need to withdraw $20,000 because my money's not safe here because this guy on the phone told me my money's not safe in the bank. Wow. You know, so I agree. This could be an 8-hour session, but it's not. Let me get to our case study, if I may. And really, it's a cautionary tale of how not to engage, right? Share with the MSP the full environment. So there was an entity that visited with a managed service provider, not here in Albuquerque, and they said that they roughly have, let me see what my data says here. They said they have 125 employees, which was true. 125 employees at their primary location. But they had overseas employees and vendors who were part W-2 contractors, right? Or 1099 contractors who were part of the computing environment. When it came down to it, there were 300 total users that were being supported, right? And that doesn't help anybody. First of all, it wasn't priced correctly, right? Second of all, the risk wasn't fully appreciated, right? If you're thinking we're supporting 125, but in fact we're supporting 300, that's a different risk model, right? And it's a different engagement model, right? So be forthcoming with somebody you expect to be forthcoming back to you, right? At the bottom line, this is about basic trust, right? Quite honestly, right? And especially in this business, you want to be able to trust your vendor. By the same token, the MSP wants to be able to trust their customer on the same level, right? Ultimately, the entity realized that it needed more in-house, dedicated in-house support to make working with the managed service provider successful, right? And they cleared up the numbers, they renegotiated the contract, and they weren't doing anything nefarious. They just didn't think about the offshore folks, but who were clearly logging into a network owned by the company, right? And, you know, it wasn't they were hiding, they just didn't think. So it wasn't nefarious. It wasn't something, you know, some sort of evil plot to cheat the MSP out of money. They just weren't thinking about those offshore folks. But those offshore folks were integral to the organization, and they were using computing resources, and they were a point of risk, simply put, right? So just, you know, when you're going through the intake as the potential customer, be forthcoming. It can only benefit you, right? If you're on the MSP side, right, make sure that's a customer you want to work with. It goes both ways, right? Are you a vendor I want to work with? Yes. Well, are you a customer I want to work with? Well, I'm not sure, right? And it goes both ways, quite honestly. I've had to fire customers. Customers have let me go, right? So I understand it's a two-way street there. So time-wise, we're a little bit ahead, but that's okay. Any other questions or comments that I can help address today? I'm going to stop sharing at this point, I believe. Yes. All right, there we go. Happy to field any other questions. Ryan, did I get everything okay? Did I touch on the stuff?
Mark, you did an excellent job. Excellent job.
That's all I'm looking for. I am slipping Ryan 20s. No. All right.
He's sending them through Cash App. I'm not in the same
there you
room.
go. Right. Your Walmart gift cards are waiting, Ryan.
Yeah, Mark, I appreciate your last points there on the last slide about preventative measures. And, you know, once it hits your system, it's already costing you money. And so the more that you can do on the front end to protect yourself, the relationship, in my mind, is sort of like a doctor-patient relationship. And the help is only as good, like you said, sometimes as the patient is willing to share. So it is a two-way street, and the job of the IT team is to kind of make sure that your IT environment is healthy on all sides. and take that IT layer out of your mind so that you can focus on your business.
Appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you. And Brendan, I haven't been able to see the audience until I stopped sharing, so I apologize. Brendan is from Ardem Technologies, and they're also in the business, right? And so I need to be balanced and fair, unlike some news networks. But we're good there, all right? So we have some good attendance today. I appreciate the comments and I appreciate the questions. Laura?
Yeah, and so thank you, Mark.
Sure.
That was an excellent presentation and so helpful to so many of our businesses. And you know, going back to Maria's question, she was asking like what industries, you know, would this best serve? And it's really like the majority of industries, if you think about it, because there's so much personal identifiable information within so many businesses. So, you know, it really is, it brings to light a lot of concerns that businesses really should consider.
At the very least, if you're not managing third-party information, your customers' data, you got your employees' information at the very least as a business owner, right? But you are touching your customers' information at some level, right? And so it depends on, you know, where that risk reward is for you, right? A number of years ago, if anybody here ever worked for the state government here in New Mexico, 2011, 2012, there was a breach of the New Mexico, the Public Employees Retirement Association, right? And the breach was a vendor, an accounting firm was doing an audit, and they received data on 30 some odd plus thousand current meaning current employees as well as retirees. And they received it on a thumb drive. They copied the thumb drive to a laptop and gave the thumb drive back. The person from the accounting firm, you know, went to another project in a different city and left 2 laptops and 2 laptop bags in the vehicle, and vehicle was broken into. Both bags and laptops were stolen the next day. 1 laptop and 2 laptop bags were recovered from a pawn shop, right? And 1 laptop wasn't. And the laptop that wasn't was the one that had the para data on it. It was determined through a forensic analysis that the laptop was not, contrary to the accounting firm's policies, the laptop wasn't password protected or encrypted, right? So anybody opens it up, they have access without trying, right? It's never been determined that that information got out into the wild, but you can't know that, right? As soon as he lost care, custody, and control of that data, it was a breach, right? And so Para engaged my firm to help with the communication to the affected individual. So I helped write a letter that got sent to 30 some odd thousand people, right? My dad included, because he was in Para. I said, hey, how'd you like that letter you received from Para about the data breach with your data? He said, yeah, that was interesting. I said, well, anyway, I wrote it. And Para paid about ultimately the money spent was about $850,000. That was all covered by the accounting firm's errors and omissions insurance company, right? They ultimately, so no tax dollars at risk, right? In that instance, but Para wasn't set up to handle an 800 line, right? So they had to hire a vendor to do that. Para wasn't set up to mail that letter out. They're small staff, right? And so it took some time to figure out what happened ultimately. And, you know, that's a problem. And that's time and energy that could have been spent doing the work of Para, right? Versus responding to a breach.
And just to add to that, I'm sure you know, Mark, in 2017, New Mexico legislature and governor signed into law the Breach Notification Act, which does put obligations on any organization where if it were to have that kind of breach, they would have to do that type of notifying at a minimum that you mentioned. And if it's over a certain amount of New Mexican citizens whose information was breached, they have to coordinate their actions with the Attorney General.
You're absolutely right. The caveat is the exception to the data breach notification statute is state government.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But Para did the right thing in doing the notifications because of reputation. It's not like a public employee can go to a different retirement, but still, right? There is a sense of, gosh, our data and information needs to be kept safe. And if my data and information is not kept safe, what about my money? Right. Then you start, right. So they did the right thing. And to credit the accounting firm, that individual was fired pretty quickly because he did not keep his laptop was not password protected or encrypted per the firm standards, right? And the errors and omissions insurance coverage kicked in very quickly, and everybody did the right thing once the wrong thing was determined. So,
and it highlights a
that.
failure too of their IT operations, right? Because their IT operations should have had visibility into their user systems and known it wasn't configured to standards.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there is a number of gaps there. So, okay.
It's great insight into those breach letters that we get in the mail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other side of that, right? But anyway, thank you for that, Mark.
You're welcome.
Great information. So we want to ask you now if you can quickly complete this poll that Elliot is going to post here momentarily. By having you guys complete the poll, it really helps us to build curriculum. We want to hear what you're interested in, and with that, we'll build curriculum. So the poll is up. The first question is, what business topics interest you for future sessions? Multiple choice, human resources, marketing, AI, legal and policy, sales and operations. And the second one says, from your above selections, what specifically interests you about that topic? So if you can please enter an answer, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Are you guys able to see the poll?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And so another thing I'd like to encourage is if you have any kind of business or IT challenge that you would like to have us discuss here on this platform, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm sorry, I'm missing Dominic. He's not here today. But Elliot is going to post our email address where you can reach out to us with those questions. And that's something that we can discuss at a further session. And I'd like to quickly do another poll just to do a quick survey on how this session went for you. So Elliot, if you could please post that, that would be great. The first question is, what is your overall rating for this session? 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest.
Can I step out of the room while they're doing this?
Oh,
You know.
I'm not sure that you can.
Just kidding. You know, right?
I'm aware of that piece, but just if you can look away,
Right.
that would be fantastic. And Mark, you won't hurt his feelings.
No,
His
not at
nurses
all.
feel. And the second question is, how likely are you to recommend the session to a colleague? 1 being unlikely, 5 being highly likely. And lastly, this session has increased, improved, or positively impacted my select all that apply. Skills, knowledge, business outcome, no change. Okay. with that, again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. If you felt this information is helpful and these sessions are helpful, we really like to encourage you to continue coming to the sessions and participating. And you can also access our past sessions at the Hispano Chamber YouTube page. We have a playlist on YouTube, and all of our past sessions are recorded there. And we encourage you to share them with others too, who might be interested. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at hispanochamberecho@gmail.com. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Have a great week. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Take care. Whoops, left the damn meeting. Let me go back in. I always do that.